So I started my research career in psychology, doing something called psychophysics. This would inevitably involve studying the responses from an individual to a great many different stimuli and very fine-tuned alterations to that stimuli over a period of time. And my particular love at that time was to study how the mind recognised faces. I'd spend ages making small changes to faces and seeing how the person reacted to them. But then one day, the manufacturer of a system called EFIT is electronic facial identification technique. It's the system the police use to reconstruct the face of a suspect based on eyewitness testimony, came to the university I was working at to give a demonstration. And we began a collaboration then where we took the knowledge we'd gained about how the mind recognised faces to see if we could improve the way that EFIT worked. And we managed to improve the accuracy with which those faces were made. Now, EFIT at the time constructed a face by combining together different individual features. And people found this very difficult. And by studying the way that people struggled to make those faces, we learned a great deal about human face recognition and perception. And we were actually able to feed that knowledge back into electronic facial identification techniques by working with physicists from the University of Kent to create the latest generation of that technology. This is based on how the mind works, so it doesn't decompose the face down into individual features, which requires someone to pick the right nose, pick the right ears, but instead you see a whole face. And we use genetic algorithms to breed the selection of face you choose to make more faces like that. So all the user ever sees is a grid of 9 faces, and they choose the face they say is most like the face of the suspect they saw. And the system will then evolve a face that's quite a good match for the suspect. So we've been able to work with technology companies, and we've done a lot of work with the police to incorporate information from psychology with knowledge from psychological research to improve policing procedures and practice. Now, because those techniques, those forensic techniques, are very revealing when it comes to the psychology of face recognition, there's something that you'll often discover in psychology curriculum. Indeed, the Open University's psychology degrees, the BSc in psychology and forensic psychology, for example, you'll come across that work. So you'll study case studies, you'll study research that's looked at eyewitness testimony, that looks at eyewitness memory, that's looked at why the mind and why humans find it so difficult to provide accurate evidence about a crime. In the third level course on counselling and forensic psychology, we look at the work of Elizabeth Loftus, for instance, who's looked at people who recover memories of childhood sexual abuse decades and many, many years after it happened, and all the problems involved in how you study memory, how you provide evidence about those memories in court when they happened so long ago. So in conducting the research on facial identification techniques used by the police, we have had several grants from the Engineering and Physical Sciences Research Council. The first one we had was a joint grant with the University of Kent to develop the latest version of EFIT. This was based on psychological knowledge and the latest computer technology. So a big improvement over the original ones that were made in the early 1980s. More recently, we've had funding from the Home Office, and there we've looked at other developments in technology, such as the use of social media within police investigations. So looking at if somebody sees a crime and then goes on to Facebook or Twitter to see if anybody else saw it, to maybe try and find out who did it, how that affects their memory for the original crime, and whether they can still provide accurate evidence. Indeed, some of the recent research that we've had published quite recently looked at whether people who make things such as EFIT images, who provide multiple sources of evidence to the police, such as an EFIT image or look at a mugshot book, whether that impacts the evidence they give a lineup. Very recently, we've had another grant from the Engineering and Physical Sciences Research Council that's joint with the Open University Computing Research Centre and with colleagues at other universities to look at citizen forensics. So this is looking at how you might develop technology that could better support public engagement with law enforcement. So rather than, as has been the case in several major incidents, such as following the Boston Marathon bombing, where you've got citizen inquirers going to social media to try to discover who that face is in CCTV, almost being pitted against law enforcement competitively and quite dangerously, because they often identify the wrong person and disrupt the police investigation. So this project's looking at the development of technology that can bring the public and police together so that they can work together to solve crimes. Some of our research is beginning to look to the future of how technology might be used by the police and by law enforcement in the criminal justice system. And for me personally, there's two strands developing. One of those is the advent of quite sophisticated and quite competent artificial intelligent algorithms that are beginning to pick up many of the tasks that a human used to have to do and actually do them a lot more accurately. And you'll have seen in the news often quite worrying stories about automatic face recognition systems used with CCTV. So one thing I'm keen to do is to look at the impact of those systems, assess their accuracy, but also assess how they fit into wider society. The other thing I'm interested in terms of technology is how it can be used to improve mental health and well-being. For me, particularly within policing. So obviously the use of technology itself can be deleterious to mental health. So one of the things I'm keen to do is look at how we might use apps, wearables and other advents in technology to try to work with the police to help them improve health and well-being.